Hey, I want to welcome you to the show, and I want to tell you that when it comes to the freight news and what you do on What the Truck, you do a great job. You are full of energy. I was going to say maybe even more energized than Drive Safe Dave and myself.
Pretty hard to do.
Because I mean, for me, I'm kind of living the dream. I sort of manifested this job. I was in a bad spot, and I sort of created this career for myself. And then FreightWaves came along, and ever since I've had creative control of What the Truck. So I'm really getting to do my passion. I'm getting to talk to the people I want to talk to about the topics that I want to talk about and that the audience wants to hear about. And I take a lot of feedback from them. So it's very validating, you know, on both ends, not just personally, but also to have created this really big community and really sort of validated the proof of concept of sort of podcasting and this TV media in freight, especially over these past couple of years.
So starting off as a podcaster, I mean, it had to be a pretty humiliating job, right? I mean, you started off with no viewers, no listeners, I'd imagine, and it slowly blossomed. Tell me about that.
Yeah, you know, so what happened is I was in the sales job in 2016, and I really wanted to start a podcast for them. I felt like cold calling was really challenging in Boston. We were all selling the same boxes. We were all selling the same space on ships. And I was like, you know, some of the higher level conversations and some of the higher level introductions, I think that a podcast would make a great medium to do that, just to give an introduction, to give them something first and give them a way to know my name and to introduce myself. And the company I was with, they didn't think that was a great idea, and they didn't like, you know, what I was doing that much. And I wasn't that great of a salesperson at the time. I was having issues with substance abuse. I'd had a lot of problems with alcoholism. So when they fired me, it was about a week before we had our second kid, and I still had some health insurance. So before the kid was born, I went into rehab, into a mental health dual diagnosis problem to take care of that issue with alcoholism and that issue with depression. And I told myself, you know, two things when I was in there is, you know, that's what I can control. And the other thing I can do is I can actually go forward with this podcast, right? And I always thought the proof of concept would work. And now I was just doing it independently. And I don't know if it was humiliating, because I've always believed that the medium would take off, even though I only had $200 of equipment. And my favorite listener is still my first listener, which is my dad. And after every What the Truck, he still sends me a review of every single show. So, I mean, it's different, but in a lot of ways it feels the same. I guess the bills are a little easier to take care of now.
Yeah, for sure, right? And I want to tell you this. I watched your TED Talks. Great job on that. And, you know, I think, too, what you're doing, right, with, when you do all these talks, you're on the TV podcasting all the time. That had to help you just kind of tell your story, because you did a phenomenal job. And I do think that one thing that what you do and even what we do here, it allows us to be a little bit more vulnerable. And, you know, and I think our listeners love that when we can make ourselves vulnerable. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think especially in the medium of podcasting, because if you think about it, it's such an intimate thing. So many people are listening to you in their headphones while they're at the gym or they're walking their dog or they're grocery shopping. They're taking you with them along on errands and out to the store. And to me, when you're doing that, you want to form almost a different kind of relationship than I think the way that like your traditional TV news is created, which is a lot, you know. So I think that really is fantastic. But the other thing that's really helped me is getting off the independent side and then getting hired to do this and being able to do it professionally. First, I was doing it as the director of marketing for a morning company. They're now called Freight Plus. I launched their show, Consulting Logistics, and I got to do that once a week. And that was good. But once I got to FreightWaves, I was able to basically do this stuff every single day and get those reps in nonstop with a bit of a safety net and a salary and those kind of things. And, you know, that's also an avenue I would recommend to a lot of podcasters out there who are who've kind of gotten past that first hurdle of getting some of the fundamentals down of doing it and really want to take it to the next level. Because nothing helps more than being able to sort of do it all the time.
Yeah. Do you find when you take this time and you jump out there and you do this, it just starts snowballing and more of the ideas just start falling down by the wayside, and you got more and more you want to get done, and it just kind of builds all this stuff up together?
It does. You know, I'm very active on like Twitter and LinkedIn, social media. So I'm speaking to the community all the time, and I'm hearing their stories and hearing their struggles. And that's actually where I source most of my guests, is because someone posted something interesting and I thought that would be a great segment. It would bring value to our listeners, and also it would help me learn, because I always consider myself a student, even though, I started out in operations in this business in 2005 before I even got into sales. So I have 13 years of experience before I really even started making money podcasting. And that's really helped form the narrative. But you bring up a great point too. Constantly speaking to people and speaking about these things and having to clearly tell people about these different issues, it really does help you form your own narrative. And then on my end, doing interviews on other shows other than my own also helps me sort of construct my own narrative. It's almost like coming up with your own sales pitch, right? The more you say it, the more comfortable you get with it, and the more you hear yourself back, the more natural and the easier it becomes.
Hey, Dooner, we've seen in some of the interviews you've done that we've done across, have you ever seen, say, in the last 12 months, more technology, more companies come out all about technology than you've ever seen before, from autonomous vehicles to you name it, optimizers? Man, there are so many startup companies coming out right now in the freight industry that's all about technology.
Yeah, I mean, M&A is huge in this space right now. Just look at some of the deals that, Project 44 has done. But I mean, look, every single day, on FreightWaves.com, there's some new venture deal or private equity being poured into these companies. Insofar as the technologies go, I'm not going to call anybody out, but I think that the ones that can clearly tell their story do a much better job. I'm not usually a fan of the guests who just come on and want to say, like, visibility and optimizer. Like, what does that mean? What's the real world example of it? You got to give more punch than that. I think, just saying a bunch of buzzwords, that's not really the kind of shows that I want to produce. Those are actually like the webinar style shows that I created a podcast the way I do to be a differentiator against, to counterbalance against. And that's always been sort of my production philosophy, is that people have to have a clear understanding of the story. And I think that always helps more. And that's always what, as a producer, I try to pull out of the guests more so. It doesn't always work, but that's always the goal.
Yeah, right. Hey, I want to hear something if I can. I want to hear an interview that you just blew it on. I'll tell you. So one time I was doing an interview. I'll give you an example with Ellen at Women in Trucking, and it was just a rough interview all the time. We were having like a 2-second delay, uncomfortable, bad job. I did a horrific job. And then she said something, and I go this. I said, quote unquote, I go, yes, that said the minute BCB really love their women here. I was thinking, come on, could you have said a worse thing to a worse person? And we had to go with it. And I was like, God, I blew that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's technical difficulties. When you have like a 2-second delay, it's very hard to communicate with people when the information you're getting back, because you keep stepping on each other. Conversation's a lot like dance, right? And if you're both not hearing the music at the same time, it's very hard to get on the same page, and it just gets awkward from there. That said, I've had technical difficulties up there at the desk where I didn't hear the guest the entire interview, and I just got off my notes, and I'm just praying to God that the next question that we ask here follows through. Hopefully that they responded in such a way to the one preceding it that this will actually make sense. And then you never know. Then you go back and listen to it. I hope that worked out well.
Yeah, so you're just basically watching it stop when their mouth stopped moving, and then you would just throw the next question out there.
Exactly, because you have no idea what this human being is saying back to me right now, and I hope that neither of us look like idiots. Some of the tough ones. I am a stickler for prep. I do a lot of research on my guests, and a lot of the reasons I do that is because knowing something about them helps earn their trust, especially if you can hit them with a little bit of their background at the beginning. They go, okay, this person's not here to waste my time. They actually looked into me a little bit, and they know my narrative a little bit, and they know my story a little bit. That said, there's been a time or two where I just didn't have the time to do the prep, and the guests may not have been that helpful. They may have been using terms like visibility and optimizer, so I had nowhere to take the interview because I hadn't personally done enough research to really challenge them on that. And I hate doing that because I feel like I'm wasting my audience's time personally, because they take the time out to watch the show. These shows are like 55 minutes to an hour long. Each segment on a show like What the Truck is 10 minutes. And that's a lot of ask for people if you're not fully prepared. And I'm ashamed of myself whenever that happens, and I try to prevent it as much as possible.
Yeah, so dude, I do want you to talk about, there's a lot of podcasters that are going to be watching this right now, and if you can give them some advice, right, aside from some of what you said about preparing for a show, talk to us about how important that is. I mean, not only when you get into an uncomfortable situation, maybe the guest isn't happening, but sometimes in your mind, you got to know where you're going with the story. You got to know a little bit about the guest you're talking about, maybe some of their background. Help me out on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's podcasts out there that are kind of unlistenable, and I think that they make a lot of those mistakes where they don't know the story that they want to tell beforehand with the guest, so they have nowhere to lead them, and you can hear it in the interview. You can hear it very quickly that they have no idea where to go. They're waiting to react to the guest instead of making the guest react to them. Prep is incredibly important, and the biggest failing that I noticed that poor podcasters do is they don't do that. They make the mistake of thinking that this is the hard part, us being on camera. It's not. This is the easiest part of the show. And if you think your work is done here, your show is going to fail miserably because all the hard work happens beforehand and it happens afterwards. Because one thing they don't tell you before you start podcasting is that if you want your show to be successful, you also have to turn into a badass digital marketer because reach and discovery is not great in podcasting. And it's very much on the host to connect with their community and do that build. And it's a slow process and it takes time and it takes cadence and it takes sticking with it. And you have to have a clear goal. You have to know your own narrative. You have to know where you want to be. It also helps during those early year or two where you're building that audience to have some sort of fallback income because it can be very challenging. Podcasting is not a rich man's game at first. Very few of us are able to do this professionally as our only job. And even in doing that, like I do What the Truck, but I also built the largest freight podcasting network within FreightWaves. I mean, What the Truck isn't even my only job. You know, I got to do a bunch of other stuff with FreightWaves as well to keep this sustained. But it's great. I'm given a lot of freedom to do it. But it's hard work. This it looks easy because it's hard. And I think you guys might agree with that.
I'll tell you. And this leads into a great and honest, secrets keep you sick, right? And I'll tell you that part of this is as we lead into this, I hadn't done a lot of prep work before our show, Dooner, I'll be honest with you. And so, and you talk about it in all honesty. So Rick liked to challenge me right when we sat down, and he said, "Hey, so you watched a couple of the shows?" And I said, "Yeah, I glanced at them. I had them on." And he goes, "So you know which?" I go and he goes, "Dooner, you know which one that is?" I said, "Yeah, I think that's the clean shaven one." and right when you came on, I go, "Yeah, I got that one wrong."
Yeah.
So,
I like that he didn't even tell you. He waited for the surprise to come in. But I don't look. Here's the thing. This is still a growing field, right? And I'm exposing myself, FreightWaves. You guys are exposing yourself to FreightWaves. Anyone within this sort of B2B podcasting TV space is exposing, or Johnny Appleseed, and we're seeding the earth. Like, I can't tell you how many people have told me that the first time they've ever opened a podcast app was to subscribe or to listen to one of these shows. And if I do it, or if you guys do it, or if, I don't know, the Chris Jollies or the Sarah Von Humphreys of the world get people to know that there's freight podcasts out there, get them to know where that podcast app is or how to watch these types of shows on video, I think you're all doing the Lord's work. And I don't hold it against people for being ignorant, because I completely understand. We're not like Tom Cruise out here, right? We're not Joe Rogan. We're building our thing. But if you come into this thinking you don't have to expose people or you have an ego about it, I think you're going to have a really rough time.
No, I agree, and great points on that, and points taken as well. Dooner, and I'll say some struggles with the podcast, and God bless you. You've done a phenomenal job. But let's face it, at the end of the day, for us to be able to do what we do, we still have real, I shouldn't say real job, but we have other jobs, right? That help support this. We have to run a real trucking. We have to do that, and then we kind of do this on the side. I love what you've done with that. The freedom to do what you do. I think it's needed to build a successful podcast. This isn't a part-time gig. If you treat it part-time, you're going to get that part-time results as well. I love what you've done with FreightWaves and all the different shows. You can see your kind of thumbprint on some of those shows as well. And I want you to make sure you've done a great job, not only for what the truck and FreightWaves, but for this industry. And it's critical that you know that your part in this industry of teaching people, talking to people that don't know a thing about transportation. You've done a phenomenal job in leading a team and educating this world. And that, my friend, is thumbs up, kudos to you for sure.
Well, I thank you. And it's by design. One of the One thing I've never forgot is when I started in this industry in 2005, and there were not a lot of resources for newbies. You know, a lot of the trade papers at the time, because they were the ones who covered this, not only was news slow, but it was also written to a specific person, and written to maybe more of an executive or a more experienced level. And I've always seen that there was a great learning opportunity, and it took me a while to figure out what that would be. And eventually the medium became podcasting. But of talking to this in and reducing a lot of these concepts down to ways that everybody within the organization can understand it, even people outside the organization. Because I think the mistake that some of these webinars and some of these writers make sometimes is they think that everybody has sort of the same knowledge base within this industry and they're at the same level. But I know that's very far from the truth from my experience in operations and sales and in marketing. And inside your own house, each department you go to, there's different vernacular used, there's different understanding. The export person doesn't necessarily know what the import person does. The marketing guy doesn't know what anybody does. That's why they're in marketing, and all those kind of things. So I thought there's just a sort of great opportunity to have a more mainstream version of how we translate and we speak about freight, and we just borrow concepts from every other type of successful media. Like, I don't think I'm reinventing the wheel. I'm just bringing obvious concepts from every other type of media that I like and putting freight around it and making it more of a lifestyle thing and a personal thing and a concept thing and creating a community around it. And that's kind of been the goal. And it's nice to hear from you guys that I've at least been a little bit successful in translating that and doing it.
No, you've been way successful. We appreciate it. Hey, Dooner, we got to get out of here. I know you got things to do. You got a world to run, baby. This freight world is counting on you. We're thankful that you gave us a little bit of your time. Hey, Dooner, stay strong out there. If you ever need some support from the 063, Mansfield, Texas, give us a holler. We'll be there, buddy.
Happy to. Hey, guys, find me on Twitter at Timothy Dooner if you want. That's DOONER. And you can find all my stuff on FreightWaves.com/WTT. That's where you'll find the show, the newsletter. I do another show called FreightWaves Insiders and all that good stuff. Guys, thanks for letting me share the camera.
All right, impressive. Appreciate you, brother.